get this question a lot. How does Jacob Prash and family celebrate Passover and the Feast of First Weeks as Jewish believers in Jesus? Your family, Jacob, how do you guys celebrate? How do you see it? It's perhaps slightly different than in a westernized Christian mentality, but how do you do it?
Well, having had the misfortune of growing up Roman Catholic due to the influence primarily of my mother, even my father went along with it, even though he didn't really believe it. I had the whole Roman Catholic agenda forced down my throat. But later on, after I became a saved Christian, I realized that Jesus did not die on Good Friday, nor did he raise from the dead on Easter Sunday. Those things came from the Quadrigesimian Schism after the Council of Nicaea, and it was by the solar calendar, not by the lunar calendar, when Passover was. So Passover and Easter can converge somewhat or overlap somewhat, but they're not exactly the same. This year, they converge somewhat. Jesus died, again, not Good Friday, but he died Erev Hag, the night of the feast of Passover, the night before the first day of Passover. He rose from the dead on Yom Rishon of Hag Matzot, the first day of the week of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It was not Easter. Easter had been a pagan holiday. So my family being Israeli, my wife, my children being Israeli, we celebrated the Seder like all Jewish families. We had the Seder, but then we did something unique that we didn't do otherwise. It was the one time a year where we would take the Lord's Supper together as a family, in the context of the Paschal meal, in the context of the Seder, bearing in mind that the Last Supper was a Seder. Now, this year, my wife is looking after an aging aunt who's from the Holocaust generation, one of the last survivors. And Pavi is away in France having to look after this aged relative at the moment. So I didn't have Pavi with me on Passover this particular year, but normally that's how we would have celebrated. We would have had a Seder meal and taken the Lord's Supper during the Seder. We would have stuck to what Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and 1 Corinthians said. He died on Passover and rose from the dead the first day of the week of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But that is not to criticize those who celebrate Good Friday and Easter Sunday. Just, it is a historical fact and a scriptural fact. That's not when it happened.
Thank you, Jacob. David, being here in America, it's a very popular, I guess you could say, holiday because of the Easter week holidays and all those things. But as a Christian, what has it meant to you, and how do you celebrate Passover, resurrection, Jesus dying on the cross for us and rising again?
Well, for me, for a lot of part of my walk with the Lord, and more so after coming to Moriel, is I did get the chance to lead a lot of Seders. They were events. We used them as outreach, which were really great. I even had some Jewish people come. One of my bosses came because that was Jewish, not well practicing, but she was glad because she could tell her parents she went to a Seder. I don't think she told them it was a Messianic Seder, but she got off the hook with her parents. So they were always great. There were evangelism outreaches, as we could explain the all of the symbols and everything. And so those were always good. But the last few years, with my mom and my dad sick and taking care of them, it's been a bit different with this move, as I'm a little bit more isolated, but not so much anymore. But I'll tell you what this season means for me. These fellowship drives have been wonderful. It's like almost like a resurrection in itself, going and visiting people and seeing them and understanding how hungry they are for the gospel, how hungry they are for fellowship. So that's been something that this season I've thought about, that these fellowship drives have been a boost to me and morale, especially after we discuss the things that we do here on Catching Up.